Now, what psychoanalysis teaches us is that what goes on in the unconscious is often not just different from what goes on in the conscious. It's also often opposite to what goes on in the conscious. Okay, so consciousness, our conscious behavior, our intentional behavior says one thing, but in fact, a lot of the time, what's going on unconsciously is quite the opposite. And of course, there is a link between the two. If what's in the unconscious is the opposite, there's still a deeply intimate link to what's being manifested in consciousness, which is not the case in situations where we are just saying that what's going on unconsciously is different. Okay, it's related, it's always related, but it's different. Sometimes, though, it's precisely the opposite. It's referring back to a concept of defense mechanism, ego defense mechanism that I've discussed before, which is called reaction formation. Okay, and reaction formation is precisely the mechanism by which the deeper content that is in the psyche is somehow felt to be too shameful or too unacceptable to be expressed. And the way in which the ego, as the seat of consciousness, copes with that is precisely by expressing the opposite. You know, it's interesting because the actual ancestor, the progenitor of this idea, not ever calling it reaction formation, is Nietzsche, in fact. But reaction formation, I have long argued, is really quite prevalent in INFJs. And it's prevalent precisely because INFJs tend to have highly developed, if not overinflated, ego ideals of who they would like to be, who they aspire to be, which often paradoxically paralyzes them into stasis because the ideal is so huge in a way that it is so distant that the INFJ does not even know where to begin. And I was talking about how this was a way for the INFJ to you know, especially the young INFJ for whom all these issues crystallize and become later more difficult to change in adult life. This is the way for the INFJ to deal with the blow to self-esteem and to self-worth that accrues when they feel misunderstood even by their own parents, which they often do as NI dominants, who are most likely not going to have NI dominant parents. Let's just face it and state the fact, right? Let's just state the fact. INFJs, the overwhelming experience of young INFJs is to be deeply misunderstood by their parents. That does not mean not loved by their parents. I mean, I like to think that most INFJs, like most children, are loved by their parents. Lots of children are not loved by their parents. And in fact, many children are abused in all sorts of ways by their parents. There are bad parents, but the majority of kids overall are loved by their parents. But the thing is, it does not mean they're understood by their parents. And for a soul as sensitive and as attuned to these dynamics as an INFJ kid, the impression of being loved despite not understanding is often going to be experienced as either a diminished kind of love, a watered down kind of love, or sometimes even a fake kind of love. And the ego ideal emerges as a kind of counterbalance to that. But it lands them later in life in all kinds of difficulties, such as paralysis and stasis. And the conscious life of the INFJ, of course, does not manifest this ambition. The conscious life of the INFJ, with most people at any rate, manifests humility, manifest a feeling of not being enough, of failing people, right? A lot of the INFJ neuroses are about not being up to the task of life. But not being up to the task of life, you have to ask yourself, could it be precisely because the INFJ has quite a grandiose notion, unconsciously, of what their task in life is? Is it all the easier for them to feel like they're failing at this task because they set up a task for themselves, influenced by their ego ideal, that is very ambitious? And so here you find yourself in a situation where underneath the self-critique, self-castigating behavior, the humility, right, and the self-defeating behavior, what lies at the root of that is unconsciously overestimation, something I've mentioned before. And this unconscious overestimation complicates the INFJ's ability to adapt to external reality, because it becomes very difficult for the INFJ to imagine what it would be like to be happy leading a simple life, a life where they're not exceptional. Okay? Let me know in the comments what you think, guys, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Give me a like, and don't forget about my 2 books. The Ecstatic Soul, my first book on the INFJ, deepest investigation into the INFJ mind, and The Infinite Soul, which is my latest book on the INFJ, and it's all about INFJs in the modern world, how to find happiness, purpose, and value. Please consider supporting me on Patreon, helps massively. The link is below. Okay, guys, you get cool perks like access to my Discord server, as well as bonus videos every 2-3 weeks on a topic of your choice. Bye-bye.